Leather Apron Club and why conservatives can't seem to let go of the past. For those of you who want to know who Leather Apron Club is, Leather Apron Club is a YouTuber who seems to have made his YouTube channel on the 21st of February 2021. He seems to be a former libertarian turned far right white identitarian. Now, his YouTube channel is pretty fascinating. He makes a lot of good arguments about things, even though I don't necessarily agree with a lot of them. But he makes good arguments, such as why the Civil War was a fault for slavery, or whether or not Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. He had sex with his slaves, or had children with his slaves, rather. Or about ancient Greece history and whether homosexuality was acceptable in ancient Greece, or same for Rome. Also about overrepresentation of ethnic groups in the media and academia and so on and so forth. I don't want to get too much into that. But what I want to talk about is how he seems to be completely obsessed with defending the past. And this is also something I've noticed about a lot of right-wing YouTubers. They engage in so much hero worship. They worship the ancient Greeks as if they were like these demigods, and ancient Romans as if they were like these demigods, rather than basically a bunch of savages who drank lead contaminated water, engaged in slavery, engaged in mass murder, engaged in rape as a form of warfare. Defending the founding fathers, this mythical, like hero worship of the founding fathers. The founding fathers, a lot of them had rotten teeth, a lot of them were semi-literate, a lot of them basically, they were not these these deities that the American education system makes them out to be. These people, the ancient Romans, ancient Greeks, founding fathers, were not entirely evil either. They're not entirely evil or good. They're not entirely perfect or imperfect. They're just people. Some of their ideas are good, some of their ideas are bad, but Leather Apron Club, he seems to elevate these figures to almost a deity-like status in order to defend, I guess, Western history. First of all, Leather Apron Club seems to be an Anglo. Ancient Romans and ancient Greece, these are not people from the Anglosphere. I don't know if it can even be, if their history can even be called like Western European history. This is like Southern European history. There's hardly any connection between the ancient Greeks and ancient Rome other than philosophy adopted by Western Europeans that belonged to the ancient Greeks and Romans. But if that's the case, why don't we assign the same status to Islamic nations who've adopted ancient Greek, and ancient Roman philosophy and practices, which they observably have? So anyway, he's obsessed with defending the past. The past is the past. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The past was mostly a bad place. That's why we left it behind. He's transitioned from a libertarian to a conservative, probably for mostly reactionary reasons. I think if he re-examined libertarian ideas, he realized that libertarianism is probably the superior way of viewing the world rather than conservatism. Conservatism is basically a dead end. You're just defending ideas and practices that are essentially mostly antiquated, not completely, but mostly antiquated. He seems like a smart guy, although he seems to be a little obsessed with race and IQ And race is, I'm not saying like there's no difference between whites and blacks and Asians and Latinos, but I think it's mostly overblown. I think it's possible that there can be racial differences and, let's say, certain characteristics that might be controversial, but I think most of it is overblown. A lot of it is cultural. You see a lot of differences between, let's say, southern whites and northern whites, and blacks from cities, and blacks from cities and urban areas, and blacks from rural areas. There are a lot of cultural practices and differences that contribute to why there are elevated rates of crime or lower rates of achievement among whites in the South. So I think he's very intelligent, but he's been, I guess you could call it, radicalized by the internet. And it would probably be best if I'm not saying like he is like a lost soul or whatever. He's an adult. He's making adult choices. But he should tread very carefully in the spaces he's in and try to remain level-headed and sensible, which he mostly is. But he should still try to remain level-headed and sensible in his interpretation of facts. Facts exist, but what story are you trying to tell with those facts? They are not value neutral, at least when subject to human interpretation.